Welcome to Brainy's chapter series for the GARP SCR. This is video number 4 relating to chapter number 4, Sustainability and Climate Policy, Culture and Governance. What you see on this slide are all of chapter 4's subchapters and topics that are going to be discussed. We're going to go into Brainy's proprietary summary pages. These are 100 pages of summary of the 200-page curriculum of the GARP SCR. If you purchase the gold package of Brainy, you get those pages. You can download them, you can print them, as opposed to the GARP material, which is only available online unless you buy the $300 book. Let's dive right into it. Chapter number 4, these are the GARP pages. It's important that with chapter 4, we already had discussed a little bit climate policies in earlier chapters, but chapter number 4 fully focuses on this topic, given its importance on society and the economy. Since 1990, there had been various attempts to agree on climate policies. The formation of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, FCCC, in the 1990s, the Kyoto Protocol in 1997, and the Paris Agreement of 2015. And one reason why it has been so difficult to establish climate policies that could be followed by the entire world is that the morally right allocation of responsibility for climate change is still being debated. Major rich economies like the United States and Europe have been responsible for the greatest share of cumulative emissions historically, which arguably are kind of the more important factor in the equation. And then emerging countries like China are the biggest emitters today. So part of the US's rise to the top economically, historically, has been powered by fossil fuels. Placing stringent policies on China today would prevent them to achieve what other countries were able to achieve thanks to the lack of painful emission cuts back in the days. The chapter discusses historical policies like Kyoto Protocol and why it fell short, how the Paris Agreement attempts to correct some of the Kyoto Protocol's flaws. One of those corrective mechanisms, for instance, are the NDCs, nationally determined contributions. Carbon taxes and emissions trading schemes are the most commonly known carbon pricing policies. You learn how these work, along with the pros and cons of each. While there are a lot of national policies, the role of subnational actors such as states, regions, and cities play an increasingly important role. For a solution to work, one critically important tool is emissions accounting. Greenhouse Gas Protocol, GHG Protocol, is a widely used standard for corporate green gas accounting and reporting. It was established by the World Resources Institute and the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. The GHG protocol and the substandards further discuss concepts like Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3 emissions. While we are at this topic, quick reminder that Scope 1 emissions are direct emissions from owned or controlled sources. Scope 2 emissions are indirect emissions from the generation of purchased energy. And Scope 3 emissions are all other indirect emissions that occur in the value chain of the reporting company, including upstream and downstream emissions. The chapter further goes on to explain the sustainability and climate investment policies like the ones formulated by the International Financial Institution and multilateral development banks like the World Bank. The European Investment Bank, for instance, issued the world's first climate awareness bond in 2007. Taxonomies to define what investments are green and sustainable, with the EU being the furthest along with its EU taxonomy, which helps qualify a green activity. That's an activity that must make a significant contribution to one of 6 environmental objectives without harming the other 5. This helps facilitate comparability and help prevent greenwashing. Further, the topic of supervision is described here, and their central banks play a major role with the network for greening the financial system. And central banks stress test individual financial institutions or the financial systems, and how it would react to shocks. Central banks are developing climate stress tests. There is also private sector frameworks and initiatives. Examples include the Institutional Investors Group on Climate Change, the Investor Agenda, Climate Action 100 Plus, and the Race to Net Zero. Biodiversity and nature are subjects that need to be considered as well and have historically been neglected in the calculations, despite the fact that more than half of the world's economic output is moderately to highly dependent on nature. The Task Force on Nature-Related Financial Disclosures, TNFD, which is similar to TCFD, is helping to create a framework to report nature-related financial risks. This concludes the video on chapter number 4 of the GARP SCR. We hope you found this interesting and hope to see you in the next video.